But are there specific time periods that you think are more uh, dangerous or risky for people staying together?
Yeah, I think when you I was going to say when the first child happens, you have to be prepared for the
Yeah.
adjustment.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's so enthusiastic about having a child, which I totally get. It's a beautiful thing. But then comes the responsibility, the time commitments, and everything else that go along with it. What we find is that when people divorce, let's say the woman is an at-home mom, and suddenly she has to go back to work, and now that 50% of that responsibility is now placed on the father who never had that responsibility. Suddenly his life is in turmoil because he has to pick up the kids, but he has to work, but he also has to pick up the kids. Well, welcome to what your partner was going through,
Right.
right? And there's an adjustment between that shared responsibility that either does two things. It either makes you bitter or it makes you appreciate what the other person was doing on your behalf that you were not recognizing. And
Right.
I think we need to be able to recognize that more when we're in the marriage, that as much as we're both working and we have the shared responsibility, it has to be a 50-50. And that 50-50 engagement not only makes your child happier, but it also shows a commitment to your partner that you're in this. And I think a lot of people don't understand that concept. They don't have a license for parenting.
Mhm.
Nobody gives us a manual. And I remember when I got my foster son and I'm sitting around the table with my friends and they're all giving me parenting advice. And went around the table, and said, "How many of you guys have kids?" And nobody raised their hands. I said, "So
Yeah.
you're giving me advice based off of your background, your own childhood background,
Yeah.
which I get, but that's not my kid's background. He's had a horrible background. That's why he's in foster care. So if I'm going to ask parenting advice, I'm going to go to my sister who has two kids. She's going through it just like I am. I'm going to go to
Right.
her." And I think a lot of people do that when they get into these first children is that what was my childhood like? I grew up in a very a house that was full of discipline, and you got smacked, you got
Mhm.
smacked on the butt, you got smacked in the face, if you got out of line or whatever. So I did not want to raise my child like that. I knew I
Right.
needed to do better. Whereas my parents said we thought we were doing our best, which
Yeah.
I don't think is an excuse because they could see my uncle and my aunt doing the same thing to their kids that they were doing to us, so they could see it. And he would say, "Do you want me to be more like your uncle?" And I'd be like, "No." Well, if you see that, then don't become that. So my
Yeah.
sister and I had to make a concerted effort to raise our children differently because we didn't want to repeat it, and we have great kids. My parents, of course, had great kids. I'm going to speak highly of myself and my sister. We came out pretty good regardless. We have to recognize that when we're in the marriage, how are we going to discipline these children? Are we in agreement with this? What are the thoughts about raising this child? What are the plans? And I don't think a lot of people do that when they have
Yeah.
it. They're like, "Oh, we have a kid, great." Now suddenly you realize your parenting skills are completely opposite. And that causes a lot of discrepancy in the marriage.